starting now. So everything will be up on the website. I'll probably load it when I get in tomorrow because I'll rush out the door today and I won't get a chance. I see that I've got Clémence from National, I've got Rowan and Satwinder from BC and Yukon, and I've got Stevens from Manitoba. So the one thing that I did is I went in and I opened all the sites from the people that are registered. I'm going to pick one site to go through because they're all very similar. The only difference is BC. I'm not going to pick BC's site because they've done a lot of customization. So I may maybe go through Manitoba's site because it's probably the one that's the most kind of straightforward. But you can see, if you look at the back end, this one here is the Ontario site. You can always tell which site you're on just by at the top of the list, which site. And I'm going to close Ontario. I'll just bring Ontario over here for now because we're not. And then Prince Edward Island, Gail's not here either, so I'll slide that out of the way. Okay, so you can tell I'm here with Manitoba. The BC site I haven't logged into yet, and then there's the national site. So you'll see that the sites all look very similar. The way that they were built was so that they would kind of use the same plugins, use the same navigation, use the same structure. The one thing you'll notice is sometimes the dashboards may be a little bit different, and that's because you can customize dashboards. So you can put different pieces on your dashboard depending on how your branch likes it. And what I've kind of done is I just leave the dashboards as they are. I'm not a real dashboard person, and the other thing is because each with the exception of national, each branch, there's one login. So that login kind of fits everyone. Yes. So the first thing I'm just going to mention, and you'll notice this here, right now I'm looking at the national site. Anytime, it doesn't matter whether it's a CPF WordPress site or any type of WordPress site, when you go to this site, you'll always see this little piece of code here, WP -admin. That is how you get to your login screen. So I went in and I logged into the other two, but BC I didn't log into. So if I were to type in WP admin, it's going to bring me to my login screen, so then I can then enter my password. So that's just a little trick that I always kind of point out, and I do have it remembered in there. So so I'm going to start with the I'm going to start with the Manitoba site, and I'll just kind of go over, and I'm going to do this more of an entry level, like as if you've never used WordPress before, just because we do have a number of new staff who may not be terribly comfortable with WordPress, so I'll give you kind of the rundown. And one thing that I tend to do when I work in WordPress myself is I often have multiple tabs open. So if you see me jumping between tabs, that's just a habit that I have. Often if I'm working on a page, I'll have the actual tab open so I can see what the page looks like, and then I'll have the back end part open so I can see like where I'm actually working on and making changes. And that way, and I'll kind of hop back and forth. So right now, okay, so we're on the Manitoba site, and you're going to see, and if we open up the Manitoba site, I'm going to open that up in a new tab, you'll see, and all of the sites should be very much structured in the same way. There are a couple of exclusions with Ontario and BC where they've added some extra plugins for advertising and stuff like that, but for the most part, this is all pretty reflective of what all of the sites look like. So the one thing, so if we look at the site, you'll see that every site has this like this image, this slider. All of our sites are built on a theme called the Avada theme. So there's some things that you will need to change that you may not necessarily be able to find them, and that's because they're built into that theme. So these images, where this logo is, things like at the top where the social media icons, that kind of thing, you're going to find that when you're going into the Avada themes, and you'll find that in the theme options. Usually that's stuff that I'll change for you, or I can help you, walk you through and find it if you're ever like, oh, I need to change like an email address or something, or if you ever wanted to change this image or whatever. Some of it's not necessarily straightforward, and it is built into the theme. So if we look and we scroll down the website, all of the websites have this kind of, these three bars in common. So they're all going to have this kind of, this middle bar, which is kind of where you can put your featured items, things that are important that you want to focus on for your branch. They're all going to have this second bar that's got their join us, their resources, the research and advocacy. And most of them will have this what's new at the bottom of the page. There's been a little bit of customization on some of the branches to put different social media feeds and stuff like that. But I'm just going to talk about kind of what the generic stuff is that we've done across the board for the branches. And this is why when I say that I'll jump back and forth between having the WordPress, the actual site, and the back end, because then you can kind of see how things connect. So we'll start with the home page, because the home page is a little different. I'll go over the home page, and then I'll go over the individual pages, and then I'll go over this kind of section, because this is our blog, this is our post section. So if I wanted to make changes on my home page, whenever you're logged in, you're always going to see at the top you've got this edit page function. So any page that you're on, you can click edit page. You can also look in your dashboard in your pages menu, and you can find your pages. So it just depends on how you want to navigate it. I often will go to find the page, and then I'll go and go through edit page, just because I find sometimes it's a little quicker because there's a lot of pages in there. And you'll see on this particular page, when you go in to edit this page, we've got this thing, it's called a Fusion Builder. And that's so that you can put in like different types of blocks and sliders and images and stuff like that. You'll see that these boxes here that are set up, they'll pretty much mirror what's posted here. So if you see that there's the box for French for Life, you're going to go in and there's your French for Life box. You're going to go in and find this is your box that's in the middle, which is your What is CPF, and then you're going to go in and find your chapter box here. Because we've got this Fusion Builder, there's a spot here where it says use default editor. If you do that, you're going to end up and you're going to get a bunch of code. So you want to try and stay in Fusion Builder if you can. Fusion Builder is meant to be kind of like a drag and drop type of thing. If you're ever building new pages, there is a library for different kind of elements where you can add, and I guess they don't have any in their library, but when you're building a new thing, there's different elements, like if you wanted to have polls, or if you wanted to have, like rotating image sliders, that kind of thing. There's all kinds of funky things you can do, and that would be something that I would get into on a more kind of advanced class. But as an entry level, we'll just talk about how these elements are structured. So you'll see that this says it's 1 of 3. This just basically says that this is it's going to split into 3 columns. So in your containers, you can do different widths and stuff, but basically for this purpose, I would say just leave everything kind of in the format that it is. And you'll see that when you hover over the different boxes, there's a little paintbrushy icon, and that's how you actually go in and change your content. And so when you're in here, WordPress is meant to be very straightforward so that you can almost work with your pieces like you would with a Word doc. So a lot of your icons, you're going to recognize your bolding icon. You're going to recognize italics, bullets, your alignments, adding a hyperlink, and whatnot. So, and any of the components, they're all going to be set up the same way. And much like if anybody is a coder, which I think I might be the only one, if you ever, find that you're in kind of code mode or you need to adjust something, you can go into the text mode, and this is where you're going to see the HTML. But for the most part, that's not necessary. I think I probably may be one of the few people that actually takes advantage of that. You should be able to do all of your edits in this visual mode if need be. So, whenever you're in any of these text blocks, if you want to add media, so this is, if you want to add in a PDF, you want to add in a picture, you want to add in a video, it's basically you would click the add media. You could go, and you've got a couple of different options. These are just like different ways to display your images. You can work from the media library, which are the files that are already stored within there. So if there's already a document, you just want to go link to it, you can do that. There's some filter options, so if you want to kind of narrow it down as to what you're looking for, you can do that. Or you can also upload files from externally. So if you had a new document or a new image that you wanted to add, you would just select the files and you would bring it in to wherever. I'm not going to go through that process. And then once you've brought it in, there's a button down in the corner that says Insert into Page, and that will put it into the page. Is everybody following so far? Okay. So when you're in, like, and you can do things like your images and stuff like that. Like if you want to have your images, you can edit your images so you can link to things like a custom URL. If you have an image and you want to link it to a website, you can do that. So you could go in and you could link it to, whatever icon you want. Image URL just means it's going to link to the image itself. And then you've got, some more advanced things. You can play with your alignment of how your images are going to show up. You can add captions. You can add some alternative text, which is the text like when you hover over icons. And these more advanced options, I usually just leave them blank. So that is basically how you are going to deal with this kind of front page. So if one of these boxes, you would go into the text block that you were in and choose and make the edits. Same thing like if you've got these buttons, if you wanted to adjust your buttons. When you go in there, you're going to find that there's a spot for the URL, there's a spot for the button text, and so you just basically are overwriting what's there. So that is how you manage your home page. So you'll see, let's close this. Oh, I think this is something I might need to do. Hold on. I might need to submit a ticket on that because the buttons don't seem to be working properly. They're freezing. All right. So so you'll see that on the home page, when you go into the edit mode, you'll see this bar and you'll see this bar, but you don't, like if you go into what's new, you just see the title, but you don't actually, see the blocks, right? So the what's new, these items here, they show up based on your posts. So if you go and you look at, are we in the, yes. So if you go in and you look at posts, you'll see that the post here, Castle Info ACL, that is your first post. So basically, it's the same idea. So say you wanted to have a post, like you had new information, you have a press release, you're doing an event, you're doing something that you want to have show up here that's got a date. Basically, you would just come into this post area, you would add a new post, you put in your title, new post, you put in your content, blah, blah, blah. And you've got over here, you've got categories here, what's new category. By clicking that what's new category and then hitting publish, that's going to direct it to show up on this what's new area. Okay? Everybody's following so far? I don't see any questions. Oh, Gail has joined us. Okay, so that is the home page. So the home page is one page that's a little bit different because of the fact that you've got those little element blocks in that what's new area. Generally, if you go on to any of the other pages, you will find that when you go and, let me find a better one. So when you go onto some of the other pages, if you go and you look at this page, I've just gone on to the About Us page, you'll find one of two things. You may find some text. So in the page, you can go in and you can enter and edit your text, add your media and whatnot, and you may find some shortcodes. And this is the trick with our website, is knowing what the short codes mean. Short codes are kind of like little codes saying, and it's kind of tells the website, go get the content from this place, or go get information from this place. So anytime you see this short code CPF article list, and this is one that shows up a lot, and it took me a while to figure this out. It basically means that it is collecting from this, so we're on the About Us page. So it is going to collect from About Us, it's going to collect pieces from all the stuff that's within that section. So on here, when you look at the actual About Us page, and I know this might be confusing, you'll see that these little pieces, what is CPF governance chapters, they actually match that menu. What is governance CPS chapter? So there's something in there that's telling it, okay, pull a little bit of code from that what is CPF page, pull a little bit of code from that governance page, pull a little bit of code from that chapters page. So if we were to go on to this what is CPF page, and we were to edit it, what it actually pulls is there's all kinds of content, but what shows up on the front page is this piece here where it says excerpt. Is everybody following that? I'm going to unmute you guys, because if anybody has any questions on that one. Does that make sense that I just
This is Gail. I understand that, but I'm just wondering how do you insert that piece of code?
It's all stuff that Jen built. So I mean, if you were trying to like set your pages up to look that way, what I would just take this little, I would just copy and paste that onto your whatever page you were trying to create. All of the pages are set up like this, like the kind of the main page are set up like this, so they should all be already set up that way. And if there's any that aren't, I can always help you go through and make sure that we've got them coded properly so that things are displaying the right way. Yeah, I don't know if that helps or not, but
I'm just going to go take a look at my webpage and see.
Oh, I can open yours up actually, Gail. I had it over here. Yeah, so let's see how yours, where did I put it? PEI. So if we look at yours, I'm sorry if I'm kind of all over the place. PEI site. We go to your About Us page. So yours is a little different. And some of the pages are like this. This is more just that if you ever see that, then and you're wondering where that information comes from. Sometimes it's a little bit of a puzzle piece to find out where the links are coming from. But you'll see your page doesn't have that little piece. But if I were to go in and put that little piece of code in there, then that would kind of change the way that it shows up. Does that make sense?
Yes, except that those read mores that I have in there are links to posts. So I'm not sure if the code would go and find that post.
You've actually coded in there. So I mean, we could play, like if you wanted to, we could take some time if we need to restructure it. I mean, if you're happy with the way it is, you can leave it the way it is. But if you want to kind of restructure it, I can always help you with kind of get the first couple set up, and then we'll be able to see how they, so I can work with you if you feel that you want to restructure it.
Okay, I'll just call you someday.
Yeah. It's just more because I know that sometimes when you open up pages, there'll be these little pieces of code, and it'll be like, okay, how do I edit that page because the information's not actually there. Like there's another example is you'll sometimes see pieces of code that refer to, we've got some different some plugins down here. So like for example, I posted a newsletter on our page, on the national page today, and when you go, there's a little piece of code that refers to this actual like plugin. So I would actually go into the newsletters section, and I apologize if I'm kind of all over the place, and you'll see this, I don't actually post the information on the newsletters page, I post it in the newsletters section. So when you go and look at the page that's called newsletters or news releases, and you see that there's all these, you look at the actual page code, there's a little short code. So sometimes I know that our website will get a little frustrating for people because it should be, you know, so that you can just kind of go into the page itself. And the key is kind of knowing what these short codes mean. So this short code here tells me that I actually need to put stuff in this area. Does this make sense to people? And again, so if it doesn't, you know, and if you come across where you find a page that you've got one of these short codes and you're like, where do I actually find the content to edit it? Then you just message me, and I can usually tell from what the short code is where it would go. So I'm going to kind of move on as long as that kind of makes sense. And if it doesn't, you can always ask me another time. Okay, so we were talking about the front page, and then I kind of jumped into the pages themselves. So the big thing to notice, and I'm on the Prince Edward, the PEI page right now. The big thing to notice is that in some cases, when you go into the page, you're going to get content. Some cases, you'll get that short code. All right, so I'm going to go back into the dashboard. So we've talked about the theme a little bit. I've talked about the posts. The media center is another piece that you should get kind of familiar with. When you go into your media library, which I did kind of touch on this a little bit, you've got in your media library, this is where any images, graphics, logos, if you put PDFs, if you put, you know, a PowerPoint presentation, if you put anything up on your website, this is where it lives. The one thing that we do have, one plugin that we've got in our website is we've got this one that's called Replace Media. This is not standard for our WordPress. This is one that we've kind of put in. And the reason why we've done this is sometimes you'll have documents and you'll be like, oh, I need to update it. But it might be linked in 3 or 4 different places. Instead of having to go on the website and find all the different places that it's linked in, here you can just come in and upload and overwrite the source document. Does that make sense? So what you would do is you would go upload a new file. So, you know, you're like, okay, we've done an update. We've changed a couple of the words. We need to overwrite that file. You would come in, you would find the image, the document, whatever, and you can always see when things were put in because there's information along the top. But you would come in and you would go upload a new file. You would go and I'm not going to overwrite this, Gail, don't worry. And it would go into a spot where you can choose your file, and you've got 2 options. Just replace the file, and that's the one we always want to choose, because then that just basically swaps out the file that's there, keeps all the links the same. If you do this one, it may kind of break some of the links. So I always use just replace the file. So if you ever have something that you need to kind of update, instead of having to add it and then go and change all the links, you can just change the source file. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else in the media library. Whoops. sorry. So that's the media library. The pages, again, you can either, when you're trying to navigate through, you can either find them from the front and choose that kind of edit page option, or you can find your pages from the back end. When you go into pages, you've got, I'll have to see what's going on with with this website, because something funky's going on. Oh, okay. So when you go into the page view, you'll see that your pages are all listed. I mean, you can sort them by date. You can sort them by title. So right now they're all sorted by title. Can sort them, you know, you can sort them by date. Oh, come on. Something's going on. I'm going to try a different website. I don't know if it's just your website, the PEI website, or if it's someone else's. Okay. Okay, so let's try this again. So yeah, so you can sort them by date. The one thing to notice in this pages menu, we have a couple of different kind of page views. And when you see, if you're in this menu, when you see this line, this basically tells you where it sits in the navigation. So this particular page is kind of sorted based on navigation. So when you look at the Manitoba site, you'll actually see that your pages are actually kind of following along, and that if you look under, if you were to look under what is CPF, you'll have our history. So these two dots tells you that it's kind of, it's in the, like, this tells you it's in the first nested menu, this tells you it's in the second nested menu. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So if ever you know, you can go in, you can edit your pages from here. You can search for pages. We also have a plugin here for Tree View, which again kind of just, it's like a site map. So it just kind of shows you, and when you expand it, you can kind of see how the pages kind of work together and how they're nested together. I'm just going to go down these different plugins. I'm going to skip over the advertising module. I know that the national office uses it. I know that Ontario uses it, and I know that BC uses it. So I'm not going to jump into that. That's something that if any of the branches want to have advertising, and I'll show you. This is, I believe, yes, this is the national site, and you'll see that at the bottom, of course it's not doing it here, but at the bottom here we have an advertising panel. I have my ads shut off, so they're not showing up right now. But if any of the branches do want to have an advertising, like sell advertising, there is a space at the bottom, and there's this this ad panel that's where you can kind of control that. Comments is another one we don't use. Calendars is another one I don't think we've been using. We do have the capacity to use it, but we haven't really been using it. This one here, contact form, we have a form builder that's built in to all of the websites. So if you ever want to build forms, there is a form builder, so you could, do a poll, do any questions. That is something, it's a little kind of funny, so it is one that best to kind of touch base with me, and I can help you build your first form because there's a little bit of code, but we do have the capacity on our sites to do form building. Now I'm going to jump into the appearance, and this is probably themes and customizer two that you don't really touch, because that is all about like the look and the feel of the site. Menus or widgets, you can go in and you can adjust those if you want to change your navigation, if you want to add things to your navigation. So when you come into the menus, you'll see, now we have on our pages, we have two menus. We have this top one here, or we have multiple menus, and we have this one here. So if you look at here, our menu name, we've got primary main navigation, and we've got the top navigation. So right now we're looking at the primary navigation. So when you look at the site, this, you know, when you go through each one, on that first, if they're in that first level, that tells us that that's their first level. When they're in the second level, that tells that when you're under About Us, Contact Us, what is CPF, governance, chapters, those are going to be your second level kind of questions or options. And the ones that are nested under that, so if you go into About Us, what is CPF, you're going to see that the like kind of next level over is the ones that are nested underneath that. Sorry, I'm kind of jumping all over the place. So if you ever want to move your menus around or change things, you can add any number of things to your menus, and you'll see there's all these, you know, whatever pages are created, they'll show up here. If you had posts that you wanted to add, you had, if you wanted to have a custom link, so say you wanted to have a link because we have the conference going on right now, say you wanted to have a link somewhere to the national conference, you put a custom link in that would have linked to an external site, and you can put that in your navigation. So any number of these things you can add to your navigation, and all you would do is you would put in, you know, I'm adding a link to the CPF national site for the conference, you would add it to the menu, I'll just okay. You would add it to the menu, and then once you hit add to menu, it shows up at the bottom, and then it's just a kind of drag and drop type of thing. So you can drag it to wherever you want it to show up. So then if you open that up, you'll see, you know, the information or whatever. I'm just gonna, and if there are links in there that you don't want in there, you can go in and you can hit remove, or you could go in and you could, you know, change the actual name of the link itself. So this
it's a scale. Before you remove it, can you show me what it looks like in the
sure.
on the view?
Yeah. So then and we've put it under members. So if I save that menu. And remember, you just always save it. And then if you've saved it, you want to, so right now under members, I'm not going to see it. But if I refresh, you'll see it now under there. So it looks the same. And then when I go click it, it's going to bring me to, oh, I clicked the members. It's going to bring me to the national, it's going to bring me to the new.
Oh, okay, so you don't see the URL, you see whatever you've named it.
Yeah. So I mean, if you've got, like, say you've got stuff in there, like, and you know, the page was originally named What We Stand For, and someone said, oh, we should change it to What CPF Stands For, you could go in there and you could just overwrite it, and it's going to make it whatever you name it.
Yeah.
That makes
Okay.
Yeah. So let me just go take that out of their menu. I'm just going to remove that. Oops, remove. And if you ever, whenever you make any changes or whatever, you just have to make sure that you hit save. And then finishing. And then you can also switch between menus. So if there was something you wanted to add to that top navigation menu, if you went in and you hit select, you'll get the for the top navigation that's there. Oh, wrong page, sorry. Okay, I'm just trying to think what else. Widgets. I don't really know that we have a lot of widgets. Oh, yes, we do. The widgets are, if you go on to any one of our sites, not the home page, but say you're on a page, I'll pick any page. These pieces that are over here on this, like, kind of navigation right here, those are your widgets. So if you ever want to edit the content that's on these sides, you find those, sorry, close that one. You find those under your widget. So you'll see block sidebar, you'll see that there's a join us. So this should like match right up to what this says. There is some coding in there. So again, if you were ever trying to, because this particular one is custom HTML, if you're ever trying to edit those and you weren't comfortable with the coding, you can always contact me and I can help you with the coding. Some of them are a little easier to kind of navigate. Some of them, this one, I don't know why it's been done in coding. But that's how those pieces that show up on this side here, you get those from your widget. I'm just trying to think, what else do we got here? Plugins, that's where you add different features and functionalities, like different, types of pages and stuff like that. That's something that if anybody wants to do any kind of plugins, if they said, oh, I really wish our website did X, Y, Z, then that's something that I work with DNS networks to say, let's find a plugin that does, we want to, like the advertising is a plugin, or, embedding YouTube videos, and we can find a plugin for that. Different functionalities, we find that in plugins. I'm just trying to think. Some of these things are just like more things that you don't really need to be too concerned about. Your chapters area, this is where you find your chapter pages and how you manage your chapter pages. So when you go into the chapters, you should see a list of all your chapters. I know there was an issue with this, and I think it's been fixed. Bear with me while it does. So you'll see a list of all your chapters, so you can go in there and you can, like, if you've got a chapter that's requested a page, you can go in and you can actually reset passwords from there. You can manage content. You can add new chapters. Again, if anybody wants help going through like the chapter, the chapter like plugin, it's usually pretty straightforward, but this is where you manage your chapters. And then there's a place where you can add your chapters. And then the rest of these down here, I mean, we do have an events calendar. I'm not sure that it's actually being used right now. I think most of the pages, people are just manually putting it in. The FAQs module, I don't think is really used. The newsletters and the media releases, I kind of touched on those earlier. There's like short codes that show up on the page that go to it, and then you would just kind of link back to it. One thing I think I forgot to mention, I'm just going to open up a page that's not... Okay, so I'm back on a home page. One thing that I did forget to mention about your pages, and I'm kind of jumping back, you'll notice that on every page there's always this icon up here, this publish icon. Whenever you've made any changes, you would come over, when you're ready to save it, you come over and you hit the update button. If you're like, oh my God, I've just updated it and I've messed it up and I shouldn't have done that, that's okay. You can always see that you can see past revisions. So WordPress will keep what the page looked like. So you can always go back and revert to a past page. If for some reason you've made a mistake, you've overwritten something by accident. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that I should go through. Does anybody have any questions, or is there anybody that's got things on their particular website that they want me to touch on? Let's make sure I've got everybody unmuted. I'm trying to unmute everybody. Yeah, so I mean, that's kind of the WordPress in a nutshell. What I often try to do is spend time with each branch so that we can go through their site in particular. I think most of the branches, at least one person has done some website stuff with me. But I'm always happy to take half an hour and go through your website. If there's an area of your website that you want to kind of tweak or you have questions about, I'm happy to kind of go through and help you organize it or help you with that. Otherwise, unless anybody has any questions, I think that's pretty well WordPress in a nutshell.
This is Gail. No, I'm good, but I will call you and as soon as I get some time and but I'll review my website first.
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, that's the other thing. Like, we need to kind of one of the other things is we should be doing is going through and kind of setting some standards and trying to content, make sure that we have content that's appropriate, because not everything needs to be on there. Some stuff can be archived and whatnot. So, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Gail. You have a good one.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Everybody else, I'm going to wrap it up. I'm assuming that we're all good. So I am going to close it down. And again, if you have any questions about the websites or want time to go through it with me, just let me know. Goodbye, all.